Don't ever step your foot into this compound. You are fired.
The Korean Mafia boss stood rigid while his twins clung to him, crying, begging him not to sack the woman who raised them in stunned silence. The penthouse did not feel like a home. Perched like a steel and glass crown atop the Seoul skyline, it was a monument to conquest, not comfort. The air hummed with a silent, expensive chill, purified and scentless. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, dizzying view of the Han River and the city's glittering grid, a kingdom laid out in lights. For Jin-Ho Kang, this was the command center of his dual empires. By the clear light of day, he was the respectable CEO of Kong and Kwon Global Trade, an import-export leviathan that moved everything from premium electronics to rare earth minerals. His suits were Seville Row, his demeanor in the boardroom a masterclass in ruthless, polished efficiency. But as the sun dipped below the smoggy horizon, a different energy pulsed through the building's hidden conduits. Jin-Ho became the dragon, the sovereign of the Ghost Dragon Syndicate. The extortion and protection rackets of his father's generation were now quaint, crude history. His was an empire of cold calculus, built on the digital frontiers of finance and the silent acquisition of power. He specialized in high-stakes venture capital for failing startups, whose desperate founders never read the fine print granting the Ghost Dragons operational control. His real estate holdings were a map of the city's underworld, owning the buildings that housed rival gangs' operations and the luxury apartments where corrupt officials hid their mistresses. Most profitable was his shadow banking network, a labyrinth of online loan services with deceptively gentle interest rates that ballooned into financial quicksand, entrapping everyone from over-leveraged businessmen to addicted gamblers from his own clandestine casinos. Loyalty here was not earned, it was purchased, enforced, and entirely transactional. Trust was the ultimate vulnerability, a crack in the foundation he could not afford. His personal life was managed with the same sterile precision. After his wife's death, a tragedy spoken of only in whispers and attributed vaguely to illness, the human element of his world had been systematically removed. The twins, Min-Jun and Soo-Min, were cared for by a rotating roster of nurses and tutors, all vetted for competence and emotional distance. They were quiet, observant children with their mother's perceptive eyes, living in a stunning cage of marble and isolation. Their world was one of hushed tones, of gifts left by assistants still in their packaging, of a father whose presence was a brief, imposing shadow in the doorway. The agency sent Maya Johnson as a temporary solution. The previous housekeeper had quit, citing the oppressive atmosphere. Maya was in her late 30s, with a calm, centered presence that seemed to absorb the penthouse's chill. She was black, an American who had come to Seoul for a fresh start a decade prior, and her references were impeccable. Former employers spoke of her integrity, her discretion, and a peculiar grounding warmth. Her impact was immediate and subtle. She didn't just clean, she curated the space. She let natural light flood the cavernous living room. She found the twins' forgotten sketchbooks and placed them on the coffee table with fresh pencils. She began cooking meals that were not just nutritionally optimal, but that filled the sterile air with the comforting smells of roasted goguma and gentle spices. To Min-Jun and Soo-Min, she was a revelation. She listened to their intricate stories about the animated heroes they watched on tablet screens, asking questions that showed she truly heard them. She bandaged Soo-Min's knee after a stumble on the balcony's slick stone, her hands firm and gentle, humming an old soul melody as she did. For Jin-Ho, watching from the periphery, this was deeply unsettling. He observed it all through the lens of a strategist. The children's laughter during her Saturday morning pancake ritual was a breach in protocol. Their eager rush to the door when she arrived signaled a dangerous attachment. He conducted a silent audit of her work. The accounts were immaculate, the silver gleamed, his wardrobe was arranged with an intuitive sense of style he hadn't requested. There was no fault to find. And that was the problem. Her competence was undeniable, but her kindness was a variable he could not control. It represented an emotional vector, a point of potential influence or betrayal. In his world, any unguarded affection was a liability waiting to be exploited. The bond he saw forming was a flaw in his perfectly controlled environment, a crack that, if left unsealed, could threaten the rigid protected detachment he believed was essential for their safety and his own focus. The decision was made with less emotion than he would devote to a minor acquisition. She was a risk. A simple business decision. One evening, as she was polishing the vast dining table that had never hosted a family meal, he approached. His expression was the same as when he terminated a non-performing subsidiary manager. Ms. Johnson, your services are no longer required. You will be paid through the end of the week. Please leave your keys and pass on the island. Maya straightened up, the polishing cloth still in her hand. She didn't look shocked, she looked profoundly disappointed, as if she had hoped for better from him. May I ask why, Mr. Kang? It is not necessary, he replied, his voice flat. A change in household needs. I will have your final compensation transferred. There was no severance, no thank you, no acknowledgement of the color and care she had brought to his children's lives. He stood impassive, a statue of tailored wool and cold resolve, as she quietly gathered her few personal items, a novel from her bag, a travel mug, a card the twins had made for her the week before. She placed her keys on the marble counter with a soft, final click. Her dignity in that moment was a palpable force, a silent shield against his glacial dismissal. She glanced once, not at him, but down the hall toward the children's wing, before the elevator doors slid shut, swallowing her whole. Jin-Ho let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The environment was secure again. The variable had been removed. The penthouse settled back into its perfect, silent equilibrium. He poured himself a glass of single malt, the ice clinking in the profound quiet, and looked out at his city. He had no inkling that the true witnesses to this purge had not been his lieutenants or his security feeds. From the shadowed hallway, just beyond the reach of the living room's downlights, two small figures had watched the entire exchange. Min-Jun and Soo-Min, unseen and unheard, had witnessed their father exiling the only source of genuine warmth they had known. They did not see a CEO or a dragon making a strategic calculation. They saw a man being cruel. And in their shared silent gaze, a new kind of judgment was born, one that no amount of power or money could ever silence. The silence that descended after Maya's departure was a new kind of quiet. Before, the penthouse had been marked by a sterile, expectant hush. This silence was heavy, accusatory, and alive. It absorbed the sound of Jin-Ho's Italian loafers on the polished floor, swallowed the whirring of the climate control, and left a vacuum where the gentle hum of Maya's presence had been. The grand rooms felt not just empty, but hollowed out. The sunlight she'd let stream in now seemed merely clinical, highlighting dust motes dancing over untouched surfaces. The scent of her lemon and sage cleaning solution had faded, replaced by the scentless, processed air that now felt less pure and more dead. Jin-Ho told himself the adjustment was a success. The environment was restored to its optimal, controlled state. He noted the twins' subdued behavior with passing concern, diagnosing it as the temporary awkwardness of a broken habit. He compensated not with presents, but with material overflow, the latest, most expensive interactive tablets from Japan, a life-sized motorized pony from Germany, a curated collection of rare, first-edition storybooks. The gifts were received with polite, muted thank yous, then left in their elaborate packaging, accumulating in a colorful, pathetic heap in the corner of the playroom. They were not substitutes, and the children's silent rejection of them was a language he was only beginning uneasily to decipher. Min-Jun and Soo-Min were processing the event with the devastating binary clarity of childhood. Adult minds might rationalize, he's busy, it's complicated, she might have done something wrong, but their minds held two simple, immutable facts. Maya was kind. Appa sent her away. In their whispered conferences after lights out, they pieced together the fragments. They remembered her puzzled frown when she couldn't find her favorite mixing bowl. They remembered the way their father had stood, a cold statue, as she left. They saw the truth not as a business decision, but as a profound moral failure, an act of cruelty from the person meant to be their ultimate protector. For a week, the tension built, not through arguments, but through 1,000 small omissions and resistances. They ate the meals prepared by the new, efficient cook with minimal enthusiasm. They did not ask to bake cookies. Soo-Min, who had begun to hum Maya's soul melodies, fell completely silent. Min-Jun's drawings, once full of heroic space adventures, now featured stark, lonely figures in vast, empty landscapes. The confrontation, when it came, was not a storm, but an earthquake, a sudden foundational rupture from a place Jin-Ho had assumed was solid ground. It happened in the soft, diffused light of the playroom, during the rare 15 minutes Jin-Ho had scheduled for family interaction. He was perched awkwardly on a too small chaise, scrolling through security reports on his phone while the children played. The quiet was broken not by a shout, but by a small, steady voice. Min-Jun, focused on adding a dark, brooding cloud to his latest drawing, did not look up. Appa, he said, his voice clear as a bell in the cavernous room. Why did you make Maya go away? Jin-Ho's thumb froze on his screen. He looked at his son, a standard deflection already forming. It was a household staffing decision, Min-Jun. It is not for children to worry about. She was our friend, Min-Jun stated, finally lifting his eyes. There was no anger in them, only a deep searching confusion that was far more devastating. Soo-Min, clutching the doll whose arm Maya had expertly reattached after a tragic fall from the balcony sofa, moved to her brother's side. She was the more emotionally direct of the two, her mother's fiery spirit glowing in her. You always say a leader has to be just, she said, invoking a lesson he'd given them after a cartoon about a king. You said a good leader listens to both sides before judging. Did you listen to Maya's side? The words were like surgical tools, small and precise, slicing through layers of justifications to expose the raw, ugly truth beneath. Business decision, strategic adjustment, risk mitigation, these phrases crumbled to ash in the face of their simple vocabulary: friend, fair, just. They held up a mirror not to his actions, but to his soul, and for the first time, Jin-Ho was forced to look. He saw not the dragon, but a man who had, in his obsession with controlling every variable, committed a profound act of cowardice. He had exiled warmth because he did not know how to manage it. He had punished kindness because it highlighted his own emotional poverty. This was a battlefield for which he had no map, no weapons, no strategy. The unyielding power he wielded, the kind that could make a debt collector weep or a rival vanish, was not just useless here, it was the very source of his defeat. He could not intimidate this truth. He could not bribe these judges. He could not negotiate a settlement with the hurt in Soo-Min's eyes or the disappointment in Min-Jun's. Their words resonated with a deeper cultural echo, tapping into the ancient bedrock concepts of honor and face that even his modern syndicate paid lip service to. He had spent a lifetime building a reputation of fearsome respect, of face so formidable it preceded him into every room. Yet here, in the eyes of his children, he had lost the only face that truly mattered, the face of a good father. Their moral authority was absolute, a force more powerful than any rival gang's threat because it came from the very heart of the empire he was trying to protect. The moment stretched, the silence now screaming with everything unsaid. Jin-Ho opened his mouth, but no sound came out. All his excuses died before they were born. He saw the intergenerational chasm yawning before him, the same chasm that had existed between him and his own rigid, demanding father. He had sworn his children would not feel that cold distance, yet here he was, replicating it with a different methodology. He had pursued success, security, and power to give them everything, and in the process, he had forgotten to give them the one thing Maya had offered so freely: unconditional human care. The dragon felt a sensation so foreign it took him a moment to recognize it: total powerlessness. Not the tactical kind, but the spiritual kind. His empire, for all its reach, could not fix this. His wealth could not buy back their trust. The realization was a shattering of his internal world, a crack in the foundational belief that all human dynamics were transactions to be controlled. For the first time, he was faced with an equation he couldn't solve, a debt he couldn't repay with money, and the terrifying, dawning understanding that in his quest to shield his heart and theirs from weakness, he might have inflicted the deepest wound of all. The quiet condemnation in his children's eyes became an unshakable specter. For days, Jin-Ho moved through his empire like a ghost, the booming voices in boardrooms and the hushed, fearful tones in underground meeting rooms sounding distant and hollow. The dragon's unflappable authority now felt like a costume he wore over a growing wound. The lesson his twins had imparted was a slow-acting poison to his old worldview. It dismantled, piece by piece, the conviction that power was purely an external, dominating force. He realized with a jolt that the most formidable power he now faced was the power of his own conscience, awakened by 7-year-old arbiters of justice. The urge to fix it was visceral, but his initial instincts were all wrong. His first thought was a command: find her. Bring her back. Offer double the salary. It was the transaction reflex. But the memory of Soo-Min's question, "Did you listen to Maya's side?" stopped him cold. This could not be another imposition of his will. To truly redress the failure, he had to engage in a process entirely foreign to him, a quest not for conquest, but for atonement. The objective was not to acquire, but to apologize. The currency required was not wealth, but humility. He began the search not with a barked order to his lieutenant, but with a solitary late-night review of the household employment files he'd never glanced at. He found her address, a modest neighborhood far from the city's glittering center. When he sent his most discreet advisor, it was not to threaten, but to inquire. The report came back: she had moved, leaving no forwarding address with the landlord. The finality of it sent a spike of genuine panic through him. She had erased herself from his reach, a silent testament to the depth of his insult. For the first time, he mobilized the vast shadowy intelligence network of the ghost dragons for a purpose that served no strategic gain. Data analysts who tracked cryptocurrency flows and police communications were instead scouring public utility records and social service databases. Men more accustomed to extracting information through fear were politely inquiring at community centers and churches. The irony was not lost on Jin-Ho. He was using the machinery of coercion to perform an act of penance. After 3 agonizing days, they found her. She was working at the Gwangju Community Outreach Center in a historically marginalized part of the city, running a children's after-school program. The drive there was a journey into a soul he ruled but never saw. The sleek towers gave way to weathered but vibrant low-rises, streets humming with communal life rather than solitary ambition. Dressed in a simple, expensive navy suit, devoid of his usual entourage, Jin-Ho felt a staggering vulnerability. There was no office to summon her to, no positional advantage to claim. He was a petitioner here. He found her in a sun-dappled room, helping a small boy glue pieces of colored paper to a mural. She looked up, and her expression shifted from warm engagement to guarded, implacable calm. The children sensed the shift, their chatter dying down. "Mr. Kang," she said, her voice neutral. No fear, no deference. It was a tone he rarely encountered and didn't know how to navigate. "Ms. Johnson," he began, the rehearsed words crumbling in his mouth. He glanced at the watching children, then back at her. "Might we speak privately for a moment?" In a small utilitarian office, surrounded by boxes of donated crayons and stacks of flyers, the dragon made his stand. He did not sit behind the desk. He remained standing, his hands clasped tightly before him. "I have come," he said, the words feeling clumsy and thick, "to offer you my most sincere apology. What I did was not a business decision. It was cowardly. It was unjust." He forced himself to meet her gaze. "I saw the care you gave to Min-Jun and Soo-Min, and instead of valuing it, I perceived it as a threat to my control. I was wrong." He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, quickly masked. He continued, pressing on before his courage failed. "I am not here just to ask you to return, though I want that more than my children want anything I have ever given them. I am here to tell you that if you do, it will be on your terms. Your role will be respected without condition. You will have autonomy over the household management and the children's care. Your salary will be tripled, and you will receive a retroactive bonus for the distress I caused." He paused, the final admission the hardest. "Most importantly, I ask you to return not for me, but for them. They miss you terribly. And I have much to learn." The silence stretched. Maya studied him, not as an employee would a boss, but as a person assessing another's truth. "The money isn't necessary," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "Respect is. Autonomy is. Knowing I won't be cast out the moment the children love me too much for your comfort. That is." "You have my word," Jin-Ho said, and for the first time in his adult life, a promise felt heavier than a contract. Her return the following Monday transformed the penthouse once more, but this time the change was rooted in truth, not in transgression. The warmth flooded back in, but it was now accompanied by a new fragile structure of mutual respect. Jin-Ho did not retreat to his office. He watched, and he learned. He saw how Maya set boundaries with the twins that were loving but firm. He observed how she communicated not with commands, but with explanations that fostered understanding. It was a masterclass in a different kind of leadership, one based on consent and care, not fear. The profound transformation, however, was internal. The experience forced Jin-Ho to undertake the arduous work of reconciling his dual identities. The sharp strategic mind that could dismantle a rival's financial empire began to turn inward, analyzing the cost of his own duality. He started to see that the strength required to command the ghost dragons, the foresight, the resilience, the tactical patience, could be channeled toward a more enduring project, building a real family. Perhaps true power was not just in controlling turf, but in protecting a sanctuary. Perhaps the ultimate loyalty was not that which was bought, but that which was earned through integrity. He began to make subtle, seismic shifts. He instructed his lawyers to begin the complex years-long process of legitimizing his holdings, disentangling the clean from the unclean, selling off the most corrosive arms of his syndicate's operations. He started spending real present time with Min-Jun and Soo-Min, not scheduled minutes, but unstructured hours. He helped with homework, fumbling through second-grade math. He listened to their stories without looking at his phone. He was awkward at first, a giant learning a new dance, but he persisted. The story concludes not with the downfall of a mafia boss, but with his painful, deliberate evolution. The dragon did not vanish, he was tempered. He learned that the most resilient empire is not one built on a foundation of fear, but one fortified by the unexpected loyalty and moral clarity he had once mistaken for a threat. The twins had done more than save their caregiver's job, they had initiated a quiet revolution in their father's soul. They taught him that the legacy he so fiercely wanted to build, the ultimate dream of prosperity and security, whether Korean or American, was hollow if measured solely in financial success. It had to be measured in the quiet hum of a contented home, in the trust reflected in a child's eyes, and in the courage to choose vulnerability over the sterile safety of total control. In the end, Jin-Ho Kang began building a new kind of power, one room, one apology, one bedtime story at a time. Subscribe, like, share and comment for more thrilling stories from Mafia Love Soul, where power meets passion, secrets unfold, and every tale keeps you hooked. Don't miss the next shocking episode.